John and Emily sat at a small wooden table in Emily's cozy kitchen, the dim light from a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Eliza's journal lay open between them, its aged pages filled with cryptic writings and hastily scrawled notes. The journal was more than a diary. It was a puzzle, each piece leading them closer to the truth about Eliza's tragic fate. "We need to figure out what these symbols mean," John said, tracing his finger over a series of unfamiliar markings. Emily nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I've seen these before," she said slowly. "My grandmother used to talk about old protection symbols and rituals. Maybe these are similar." They spent hours poring over the journal, cross-referencing the symbols with old books from Emily's personal library. As the night wore on, they began to piece together a series of locations within Tulip Town that Eliza had marked with the same symbols. "These must be significant," John said, excitement building in his voice. "We should check them out." Emily agreed, though a sense of dread lingered. "We need to be careful. If these symbols are connected to Eliza's spirit, we could be walking into a trap." The next morning, John and Emily set out to investigate the first location marked in the journal, an old abandoned church on the outskirts of town. The building was in ruins, its once sturdy walls now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. As they approached, a chill ran down their spines. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Broken pews lay scattered across the floor, and the stained glass windows were shattered. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden beams overhead. John and Emily split up, searching for any clue that might help them understand Eliza's markings. John found a hidden compartment beneath the altar, inside which was a small rusted box. With trembling hands, he opened it to reveal a collection of old letters and a tarnished locket. "Emily, come look at this," he called out. Emily hurried over, her eyes widening at the sight of the contents. "These must belong to Eliza," she said. "Let's take them back and see what we can find." Back at the bakery, John and Emily carefully examined the letters and locket. The letters were love notes between Eliza and her fiancé, William, filled with heartfelt expressions of their love and plans for the future. But as they read further, the tone changed. The later letters hinted at a growing fear and paranoia. "Eliza mentioned someone following her," Emily said, her voice trembling. "She didn't know who it was, but she felt constantly watched." John nodded, a sense of unease settling over him. "This must be the stranger she wrote about in her journal." Their investigation was interrupted by a sudden, violent gust of wind that blew through the bakery, scattering papers and sending a chill through the room. The air grew colder, and the faint sound of whispering filled their ears. "She's here," Emily whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "Eliza's spirit is trying to stop us." Determined to continue, John and Emily pressed on, seeking out more information from the townspeople. They visited the oldest residents, hoping to uncover any stories or memories that might shed light on Eliza's death and the stranger she feared. An elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson provided a breakthrough. "I remember Eliza," she said, her voice frail but steady. "She was a kind girl, always helping others. But there was a man, a newcomer, who seemed to have taken an unhealthy interest in her. No one knew much about him, but he always seemed to be lurking in the shadows." Mrs. Thompson's words resonated deeply with John and Emily. They began to piece together a timeline of events leading up to Eliza's death, revealing a pattern of stalking and intimidation by the mysterious stranger. As their investigation deepened, the supernatural activity intensified. Poltergeist phenomena plagued the bakery. Objects moved on their own, strange noises filled the air, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. It was clear that Eliza's spirit was growing increasingly agitated. One night, as they were reviewing their findings, the lights flickered and went out. The room plunged into darkness, and the sound of shattering glass echoed through the house. John grabbed a flashlight and shone it around the room, only to see a ghostly figure standing in the corner, its eyes glowing with malevolence. "Emily, get behind me," he whispered, his voice shaking. The figure advanced, its form shifting and flickering. John felt a cold hand grip his shoulder, and he turned to see another apparition standing behind him. Panic surged through him as he realized they were surrounded. "Run!" Emily screamed, grabbing his arm and pulling him towards the door. They fled the bakery, the ghosts close on their heels. The night was filled with their terrified gasps and the eerie wails of the spirits. They didn't stop running until they reached the safety of the town square, where the apparitions finally dissipated. The close encounter with the ghosts left John and Emily shaken, but more determined than ever. They knew they were getting closer to the truth, and the spirits were becoming desperate to stop them. They redoubled their efforts, scouring every corner of the town for clues. Their investigation led them to an old, neglected cemetery on the outskirts of Tulip town. The graves were overgrown with weeds, and many of the headstones were illegible from years of weathering. They searched the cemetery, hoping to find any trace of Eliza or the stranger who haunted her. As they wandered through the rows of graves, John noticed a peculiar tombstone. It was newer than the others, with fresh flowers placed at its base. The name inscribed on it was William Anderson. "This must be Eliza's fiancé," John said, kneeling to examine the grave. "But why is his grave here, away from the others?" Emily joined him, her eyes scanning the surrounding area. "There's something strange about this," she said. "Let's keep looking." As they delved deeper into the cemetery, they were approached by a man named Richard, who claimed to be a historian with an interest in Tulip Town's past. He offered to help them with their investigation, providing them with old maps and documents that detailed the town's history. At first, Richard seemed genuinely helpful, but as time went on, John and Emily began to sense something off about him. He was overly eager to lead them in certain directions and seemed to know more about Eliza's story than he should. One night, as they were poring over maps in the bakery, Richard slipped up. He mentioned details about Eliza's death that were not public knowledge, details only someone intimately involved would know. "How do you know that?" John demanded, suspicion flaring. Richard's face twisted into a sinister grin. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Eliza's secrets are mine to keep." Emily gasped, realization dawning. "You're the stranger who threatened her." Richard lunged at them, but John and Emily managed to fend him off and escape the bakery. They ran through the dark streets, Richard's enraged shouts echoing behind them. Breathless and terrified, John and Emily sought refuge in the old church where they had found Eliza's letters. They barricaded themselves inside, trying to catch their breath and plan their next move. "We need to find the ritual," Emily said, her voice trembling. "It's the only way to stop Richard and free Eliza's spirit." John nodded, determination stealing his resolve. "We'll find it, Emily. We'll put an end to this." With renewed determination, they continued their search, combing through the journal for any clue that might lead them to the ritual. As dawn approached, they finally found a passage detailing a ritual involving items connected to Eliza's life and death. "We need to gather these items," John said. "It's our only chance." The ritual required several specific items: Eliza's locket, a piece of her wedding dress, a vial of her tears, and a lock of her hair. John and Emily knew they had their work cut out for them. They decided to split up to gather the necessary items, hoping to complete the ritual before Richard could interfere. Emily set out to find the locket and the wedding dress, while John searched for the tears and hair. Their efforts were fraught with danger as Richard's presence loomed over them and the supernatural activity continued to escalate. Emily ventured into the attic of Eliza's old house, hoping to find the wedding dress. The attic was dark and cluttered, filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. As she searched, she felt a cold hand brush against her arm. She turned to see Eliza's ghost standing behind her, its eyes filled with sorrow. "Please," Emily whispered. "I just want to help you." Eliza's ghost nodded and pointed to a dusty trunk in the corner. Emily opened it to find the wedding dress, carefully preserved despite the years. Alongside it was a small, ornate locket. "Thank you," Emily said, tears filling her eyes. "We'll make this right." John's search led him to the cemetery where Eliza's fiancé was buried. He dug through the grave, feeling a deep sense of unease. As he unearthed the coffin, he found a small, preserved lock of hair tied with a ribbon. He took it and rushed back to meet Emily. The final item, the vial of Eliza's tears, proved the most elusive. They found a reference to it in a hidden passage in the journal, suggesting that Eliza had hidden it in a secret compartment in her house. Emily and John returned to the house, searching every nook and cranny. Finally, they discovered a small hidden drawer in the base of Eliza's vanity. Inside was a delicate glass vial filled with what appeared to be tears. "We have everything we need," John said, his voice filled with determination. "Let's perform the ritual and put an end to this." With all the items gathered, John and Emily prepared to perform the ritual. They set up a makeshift altar in the bakery, arranging the items according to the instructions in the journal. The air grew heavy with tension as they began the incantation, their voices trembling. As they chanted, the room filled with a cold wind, and the ghostly figures of Eliza and Richard appeared. Richard's ghost was furious, his eyes burning with rage. Eliza's ghost, on the other hand, looked desperate and pleading. "We have to keep going," John said, gripping Emily's hand. The ritual reached its climax as John and Emily continued to chant, their voices rising above the howling wind. Richard's ghost lunged at them, but Eliza's spirit intervened, holding him back. With a final powerful incantation, a blinding light filled the room. When the light faded, Richard's ghost was gone, and Eliza's spirit stood before them, her expression peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing softly. "You've freed me." With that, Eliza's spirit dissipated, leaving John and Emily alone in the now quiet bakery. They collapsed into each other's arms, relief washing over them. With Eliza's spirit at peace, the haunting in Tulip Town ceased. The townspeople emerged from their homes, cautiously optimistic as the oppressive atmosphere lifted. John and Emily became heroes, their bravery and determination praised by everyone. The bakery became a symbol of hope and resilience, drawing people together to share stories and support one another. Emily's business flourished, and John found himself becoming a part of the community. John and Emily spent many evenings reflecting on their journey, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They knew they had been through something extraordinary, and it had changed them both forever. "We did it," Emily said one night as they sat together on the bakery's porch. "We really did it." John smiled, squeezing her hand. "We did. And now we can look forward to a future without fear." As time passed, John and Emily began to consider their future together. They talked about their dreams and aspirations, and how they could use their experiences to help others. They decided to stay in Tulip Town, dedicating themselves to preserving its history and ensuring it remained a safe place for everyone. Their relationship blossomed, and they became known as a couple who had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged stronger for it. John and Emily stood on the hill overlooking Tulip Town, the sun setting behind them. They knew their journey was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They had each other, and that was enough. As the night fell, they turned back towards the town, their hearts filled with hope and determination. They had survived the horrors of Tulip Town, and they would continue to protect it, no matter what. The haunting of Tulip Town had come to an end, but the story of John and Emily was just beginning.